Ken, it's so great to connect today. A few months ago, I heard you speak at the National History Day competition where my daughter Kyla was competing. It was great to hear your presentation then, and I look forward to our conversation today.
Happy to. Great to be with you.
As you think back on your career, Ken, what lesson have you learned that you would most like to pass on to others?
Well, the first thing I'd like to do is erase the word career. The great poet and novelist Robert Penn Warren once riveted me with this stare, this glare that said to me, "Careerism is death," just like that. And I think that too often the motivations for what we do are influenced by money or influenced by other people, including parents, who are probably the biggest influence. What other people doing, kind of contemporary fashions. And careers suggest that your life and your trajectory are not in your hands, but in the hands of others who have determined what that trajectory might be, whether it is parents or whether it is friends or the pressures from society or something else. In his essay on self-reliance, Emerson says, "Do whatever Inly rejoices." And so it's been more than 40 years since Robert Penn Warren scared the hell out of me by saying careerism is death. And I have consciously never used the word career. I've always, without the context like this, I've always called it my professional life because there ought to be lots of different things that engage you. Um, my biggest thing in the area of documentary aren't sort of the do's and don'ts. There's some rules that people believe are present in documentaries. My argument is there's only one, and that is in the editing room, a shot lasts as long as it lasts. But I've learned two valuable things. One is Socratic. You sort of have to know yourself. Filmmaking is on the surface kind of glamorous and attractive. And I think, as your daughter Kyla has already found out, it's a lot of hard work. And
Yeah.
there's no shame in somebody saying, I really don't have something to say. I don't really want to go through all of this. I'd rather raise a child or tend a garden or be a rocket scientist. That may be a legitimate thing. So there's that constant sense of asking who I am, what I want. And the other is perseverance. There are way more filmmakers and way more talented people than there are actually places, films to make and money to pay for those films. And so there requires a lot of sacrifice and a lot of not just participating in the hard work of filmmaking, but I, for example, moved from New York to New Hampshire where I could live for nothing so that I could finish my first film. That first film was on the building of the Brooklyn Bridge. I looked about 12 years old when I was making it, and people delighted in turning me down. And for many, many years, I had two gigantic three-ring binders on my desk with literally hundreds and hundreds of rejections. And I wanted that in front of me to remind me that you don't get something for nothing, that you pay for it with effort and hard work and perseverance. So if you know who you are and what you want to do, there's no shame in saying, I don't want to do this and find something else. And then persevering are really the keys. Now they sound like platitudes in the face of an industry or a pursuit, artistic or otherwise, about making documentary films, and we can get into that. But that's the best advice I could give. I would not be here had I not gone to Hampshire College, an experimental school in Amherst, Massachusetts, still there, still experimenting. And they hadn't either sort of indirectly or implicitly sort of communicated those two things. We tried, we failed, we practiced, we sacrificed, and I'm here where I am because of following those two dictates.
I love to hear about the sacrifices you made, the rejection letters. I've been thinking a lot about this idea lately that to really excel, we have to, as you said, know ourselves. And that includes, not only finding out what we're passionate about, but also finding out where we have some ability and where we
Right.
have the ability to persist. And so as you think about balancing these two things, how do you, how would you suggest people balance the one, finding who you are and what you're talented at, especially if maybe what you want to be good at, or maybe what you even want to persist at, you're just not able to because either you don't have the talent or you don't have the ability to stick to it.
So you're asking things that have to do with sort of professional advancement. And what we have as an intermediate step is this wonderful thing called school, in which you are basically bombarded, culture does that too, with lots of sort of options and ideas. And of course, there are influences from people wanting you to do something or the other. And I think what you have is the ability to experiment and try and fail and succeed and to begin to center yourself through this. I mean, I thought I wanted to be a filmmaker from the age of 12 on. That was pretty clear.
Wow.
But that meant a feature filmmaker, and I ended up at Hampshire, and they were interested not in the industry, but in documentary, the truth of what is and what was. And so I had to decide then, was that something that I would accept, or would I go some other place to figure out what it was? I accepted it. 4 years later, by the time I was leaving, my final senior thesis, though they don't have seniors and they don't have thesis, my Division 3 project, as it was called, was a work on work in the early days of this republic, 1790 to 1840. And we were at Old Sturbridge Village, a living history museum in Massachusetts. And the last shot of that film, you can appreciate, is a pan across a painting. Everything else was, just following interpreters and costumes. And if you told me at that point that 50 years later, I would still be doing the same thing, I would have said you were out of your mind. But things just developed, and I realized I was given the gift out of adversity of choosing filmmaking, death in the family,
Mm.
loss. I was given the gift of Hampshire College. I was given the gift of intersecting with a completely untrained and untutored discipline, history. Last course I took in history was Russian history in the first year of college. The last time I took an American history course was 11th grade when they make you take it.
Wow.
But the rest has literally been American history, with the exception of my most recent film on Leonardo da Vinci, which is you begin to realize that you're after universal stories and universal truths, regardless of the subject matter. And if you can hit that, you can hit the jackpot. Anyway, it's been a wonderful life, but I think school is where you center and struggle and explore and try different things. I know lots of people who have come through our shop have come through, being history majors or being political science majors, and all of a sudden want to do this, or their interest is more in editing and not in producing, or someone's more in producing, someone is more in writing. And so you begin to see my obligation with the folks coming through is to help them see what it is they want to do and make sure that we can help them do that, and if not, urge them out of our nest and into the even more dangerous and deep and roiling waters of the so-called real world.
Universities play a number of functions. They give, you know, young adults a chance to move away from home or, learn different cultures. Their way, of course, to get jobs and learn about the disciplines. But I think one of the maybe most undervalued aspects of them is they give us exposure to lots of different ideas and career
That's
paths.
right.
And I think what you're saying here is one of the greatest values is they let us sample. They let us sample all of these different opportunities, career paths, and then they give us the chance to just latch on to the good ones. So I think that's a great answer to the original question I asked. Sample, experiment, and then when you come across a good opportunity, latch onto it.
Well, I think what happens is that once again that career word comes in, and that we have to realize that secondary, particularly let's focus on secondary education, is supposed to be transformational. So what does that mean? That means what you just described, being exposed to a number of variety of things that are not just within the academic curriculum, but also in sports and in friendship and in being away from home, as you say, and being in a new kind of culture. And so that's the transfer. The problem is that secondary education has become more transactional. And so that what it does become is this is merely a passage on the way to a certain job at a certain place. And that's where we wake up at 30 or 35 or 40 or 45 and go, oh, I think I made the wrong turn or I made the wrong choice. And I think that we have to return to higher education. It's transformational thing. That's why Hampshire is so fantastic because it was not at all about I never thought, what job am I going to get? In fact, when I moved from New York City, where I'd gone to try to make my first film, up to New Hampshire to live for nothing, I just assumed that what I was doing was taking a vow of anonymity and poverty. And the assumption of that actually delivered me away from that. That hasn't happened. The first film was nominated for an Academy Award. I started making money. It was funny, but sometimes when you make choices, as back to Emerson, that inly rejoice, it doesn't seem at first blush the right thing to do. When the Brooklyn Bridge film, which is the first film, was nominated for an Oscar, people said, now you're coming back to New York, you're moving to LA. And I said, no, I'm staying there. So for the last 45 plus years, I've lived in the same house and slept in the same bedroom as I did in August of 1979 when I moved up there to starve and be anonymous. And it's been a wonderful thing to go against the tide of, now I'll go back to that word, career advice. I did everything that career advice said not to do. And it has made, as Robert Frost might say, all the difference.
Well, I love hearing your experience. After I had finished my undergrad, 3 years later, I decided to go to law school, mostly because I just wanted to go. I thought it would be a great opportunity to train my brain, to learn things I was interested in. I admired my dad and brother who had gone to law school, and I wanted to be able to emulate some of their characteristics and traits. And the advice that many people will give is if you don't want to be an attorney, don't go to law school. And I ignored it. I was like, I guess the advice is, if you don't know for sure that you want to be an attorney, don't go to law school. And I was like, I just kind of want to go. And I went and I loved law school. And as they say, many people go to law school and they get rewarded with the golden handcuffs. You get paid really well, but you're stuck in a career that for many people is not satisfying. And after law school, I thought I just want to replicate this forever. So that's when I decided to do the PhD. And now I'm in the career that I just absolutely love. Had I not taken that leap of faith, I guess I would have never found out, or I would have never arrived in this career that I'm at. So I just love hearing somebody who did something kind of similar and ended up in
Yeah.
a great place.
My oldest daughter was at a well-known Ivy League school. Between her junior and senior years, she served as an intern at a civil rights law firm that was suing the city of New York on behalf of the Central Five, um,
Oh,
uh,
wow. Yeah.
Central Park Five,
Hmm.
and wrote her final senior thesis. They'd have them there, and just I presumed, and I think she presumed that she was going to go on to law school, and took the LSATs without studying, and was basically assured that she'd be in every single law school, but maybe two. Um, just smart as anything. And I said, so, where do you want to go? She said, I think I want to write a book about these now men, but these boys who are, falsely accused and coerced confessions. And so I said, fine. I introduced her to my literary agent and they accepted a proposal and she started to write. And I was her editor, marking up lots of pages. She found her voice and didn't. But as I was reading those pages, I said, oh my God, there's a film here too. And her husband to be, had been working with me for a number of years. And we all decided to do it. And now our most recent film on Leonardo da Vinci, she's the co-director, as is her husband, along with me. And we had done a major series on Muhammad Ali, and before that on Jack Robinson. They went off and did one on housing, and we finished that Central Park Five. And so it's been more than 15 years of collaborating with my daughter, who I thought and she thought
Yeah.
she was headed to law school, and just made this last minute adjustment that moved towards where her heart was and where her interests were. And we've considered we've she's continued to be able to do that within the purview of what we're doing. And it is, of course, one of the great delights of my life to be able to work with my daughter and my son-in-law.
Well, Ken, this is so great. I love hearing your advice. I love hearing from somebody who has taken a non-traditional path. And that made all the difference, as you said, and you've ended up doing things, experiencing things that had you followed the traditional career advice, you would have had just a much less fulfilling
Well,
and
I'll tell you, there's one other thing that I neglected to say is that even coming out of Hampshire College, I graduated in 75. Um, the thing to do if you were in film was to go to New York City, as my fellow students who graduated in film did, and apprentice yourself to film companies and sort of get work. And I had this sort of Hampshire model of self-sufficiently. So I started my own company with a couple of other
oh,
students. That company is still going. It's called Florentine Films. And we've been making films ever since. And it was also sometimes the risk is the thing you've got to do. Most of the decisions we make, we're trying to soften risk. We're trying to, in a job way, live in a gated community to
mhm.
make sure that things are comfortable and easy and there's a sort of a glide to where it is. But in fact, most of us, if we examine ourselves, it's the obstacles, it's the difficulties, it's the early death of my mother that is prompted who I am. And it's sometimes to lean into the friction, to lean into the difficulty is in fact the best way to learn about yourself. You get instantaneous feedback and you get to make sure that you don't wake up at 45 having forgotten that I was in New York. I'd shot most of this film on the Brooklyn Bridge and I needed a real job and I got offered a job at what seemed like a lot of money to me. And I realized I said no, because I thought I was going to put all that footage, promising myself I'd finish this film up on top of the refrigerator on this shelf. And I'd wake up and I'd be 45 and I hadn't done it. So I moved to New Hampshire so that I would make sure that I did it and I did it. And that made all the difference. And there was not been a regret. I think I have the best job in the country. It educates all of my parts. And I'm happy to be contradicted by anybody else who feels that they've got the best job in the country. And that's what you want to do, whether it is making documentary films or being a lawyer or tending a garden or raising a child or writing a symphony or being a rocket scientist. It does not matter. You just have to do, as Emerson said, what Inly rejoices.
There's a phrase, that the tallest poppies get cut down first, so you don't want to stick out. Or there was a phrase that struck me when I was younger. Uh, Better to stay quiet and let people think you're dumb than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. And I kind of I connected with these ideas of just fit in. And as I've gotten older, I've thought, you know what? It's more exciting and more fulfilling to not necessarily try to stand out, but just
I
chase the passion and
well,
ignore what may be the common sense advice.
let me tell one more story. When we're in the editing room and we're screening just for ourselves an episode of a particular film, um, it had been my tradition that the editing team, the editor and the assistant editor and the apprentice couldn't say anything. It's their show, right? So we would talk and I would go down the seniority chain, right? I would start with a co-producer or co-director with me and the writer and then other producers and other editors. And finally at the end, ask what the interns who are 21, 22, 23 felt. And then I realized as I got older and older that the older I got, the more I understood how little I knew. And what was interesting about these college age students who just passed is that they had a sense that they knew everything, as I thought I did when I was 22 and 23. So I completely reversed it. Now I ask the interns, people who think, not naively, but just think with a sincerity that they know everything. I want to know what their opinion is. And then I move up the table. Now, sometimes there is naivete in that certainty,
Mhm.
sometimes there isn't. But I've completely flipped it around. I want to hear from those people who are certain about things because the older I get, the less certain I am. And it's a terrific gift for me. It's a terrific gift from them to be called on first, to be taken seriously, to be gently told that that wouldn't work because of this exigency or that exigency. But it's funny. We've completely reversed. I want to hear from those people who are certain, the poppies that stick out, the people who are not silent. and sort of let the chips fall where they may. And we never create an environment where they're embarrassed by what they've said.
Yeah.
Even if you look at it and just say, well, that's a ridiculous idea. I would never say that. I would go, oh, that's interesting. But if you think about it this way, and then what happens is they grow in their confidence, and we sometimes learn more about our film from their certainty about it than we do about the wisdom that comes from the humility and the patience of knowing that the older you get, the more you realize that
Yeah.
you don't know.
What an interesting way to break out of conformity,
Right.
and which I guess is one of the themes of this episode today. Well, Ken, awesome. Could not have expected or hoped for anything more than this. I look forward to sharing this with my students, with my children, and also re-listening to think about ways that I can continue to apply these lessons in my own life. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, Ken.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much.